Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we are back from Green Bay and ready to get rolling, and the Pack might be back in Green Bay, but we'll get to that in a little bit. We have our NFL 2024 Week 6 recap. Of course, we're not here last week, so there was no Week 5 recap, so now we're moving straight to the Week 6 recap. Before we jump into that, though, just a couple tidbits of news, starting off with some big injuries on defensive lines in the NFC. With the Washington Commanders losing their big-time defensive tackle, Jonathan Allen, for the year with injuries, and the Detroit Lions losing their young star edge rusher, Aiden Hutchinson, for the year with injuries. So two very sad injuries to see there, and two huge parts of defensive lines getting taken out in the NFC. And then finally, one last bit of news. The New York Jets fired Robert Saleh as their head coach. That was actually a Week 5 bit of news, but as mentioned, just getting around to it. So big change there in New York, and actually due to some scheduling issues, we are recording this on Monday night. So we have not yet seen the New York Jets at Buffalo Bills game. We'll have to see how that goes and how the Jets are able to do without Saleh and using an interim head coach. As we know, if history repeats itself, they'll actually probably do pretty good. Interim head coaches seem to usually come in and win nowadays, which is a crazy thing to say considering you'd think that wouldn't happen at all. But some sort of fire, some sort of motivation comes when the head coach gets fired. So we'll see if the New York Jets can keep that rolling. Now we will move straight into our games, starting with the Pack, who I mentioned could possibly be back because they had the Arizona Cardinals come into Green Bay, and the Packers swamped them by a score of 34-13.
Yeah, and this one was over before halftime, really. The Cardinals put up a little bit of a fight, especially towards in the second quarter, with a couple of late points before halftime, but it just wasn't enough as the Packers and Jordan Love had a dominant lead and a dominant style game from the very beginning. This included a big game from Romeo Doubs, who returned from suspension, and he had 2 touchdown catches to prove that he can be a part of this offense. And that was part of his suspension, was due to him missing practice for personal reasons last week. So it seems like he's back in the fold now after being a trade candidate for a little bit. But with those 2 touchdown catches, he proved his role in this Green Bay Packers offense is very important. And another touchdown catch by Christian Watson, who had a couple of big clutch catches, including the one touchdown that really put the game away after an Arizona Cardinals turnover, as this Packers defense continues to lead the league in turnovers, where even though Xavier McKinney's interception streak stopped at 6 games, we got 3 fumble recoveries, and 3 forced fumbles for 3 more turnovers added to our league leading, I want to say 16 or 17 total turnovers now in the NFL to lead the league in total turnovers, which is big, because it's the first time that the Packers have led the league in turnovers through 6 weeks since 1996, which is the Brett Favre Super Bowl year. So just a little bit of possible history repeating itself, because we like to have history repeat itself here in this show. So we'll see if that continues to happen. And, the Cardinals, hats off to them for trying their best, but it just wasn't enough in Green Bay for them to overcome.
Yeah, I actually expect you to say since the 2011-2012 Super Bowl season with Rodgers. That's what I thought was coming, but we had to jump all the way back to 96.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the big story of this game. There's not much to say other than turnovers. The Cardinals shot themselves in the foot. They put up a fight, but every time they started to really put up a fight, they would turn the ball over, and all of a sudden any momentum is gone, any chance of coming back was gone, and it just, you can't win the game when you're -3 in the turnover differential. It just doesn't really happen. You never really see it.
It's tough.
The Packers have had multiple turnovers in every game they've played this season, which is absolutely insane and is certainly a winning formula. To be honest, can't believe they even have 2 losses. It was to really good teams, but
Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised they have 2 losses when being that positive in the turnover differential. But yeah, I think the big deal with the Cardinals here is, coming up from Arizona to the frozen tundra, it was cold, it was rainy. You got to be able to play through that no matter where you're from as a team. But I think that really affected them a lot more than it would any other normal team. So I'm going to kind of say that's the reason they looked so bad, because I'm a little bit of a Cardinals fanboy this year. I've been really with the Cardinals. I'm going to say that's the reason they look so bad. They also might have just looked that bad. Huge loss for the Cardinals in this one was Marvin Harrison left in the first quarter with a concussion. Not sure how he's looking for this upcoming week 7, but for right now, I think they still have him ruled out as he's still in concussion protocol and missed this whole game.
Yeah, it happened early in the game.
Very early in the game, like literally I think their first or second drive. But moving on past that, next up we have, since the Vikings were on a bye week, not talking about the Vikings this week, we have our game of the week that we had marked for week 6, which was the Washington Commanders heading to Baltimore to take on the Ravens and slightly losing by a score of Washington with 23 and Baltimore with 30. This was a hell of a game from the start. I mean, at one point it kind of looked like the Ravens were going to run away with it, but then the Commanders put up a really commanding fourth quarter and were able to get themselves back in this game and get themselves within that one score. But the rushing attack of Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson was just too much. Huge games by a couple of key players. Lamar Jackson had a pretty big game, but it was much more highlighted by Zay Flowers, who had over 130 yards, and Derrick Henry, who had over 120 yards plus 2 touchdowns tacked on that. This was a game coming into it of the number 1 and number 2 offense in the league, and it looked like it from the start. It didn't have the highest points, like 23-30 is by no means like an absolute barn burner, but it was still a shootout in its own way. You could tell it was 2 really good offenses going at it. Really slow start. I want to say at the end of the first quarter, it was 3-3. Actually, I can see it right here. I know it was 3-3, but then by halftime, it was 10-24 or 10-17 rather. So really started to pick up, and that pickup really just continued through the fourth quarter in that second half. But overall, just a hell of a game. And Jaden Daniels, do not hang your head. He still played a really good game, put up 2 touchdowns, I believe both to Terry McLaurin, which is really cool to see McLaurin continue to get involved. Just easily, we marked it as game of the week, and it was game of the week.
Yeah, this one was just as entertaining as advertised, with the top 2 offenses going up against each other. And this was another game where Jaden Daniels did not turn the ball over, so he continues his turnover-less streak. And this was another game where Lamar Jackson actually went over 300 yards passing, including that 130 to Zay Flowers. So just because of that, this game was very entertaining to see both of these quarterbacks really show that they can throw and run. And the Commanders put up quite a fight right up until the fourth quarter, where they scored 10 points to bring it to within the 7, but they just kind of ran out of time, and the Ravens were able to put this one away late in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and another thing that I forgot to note is Mark Andrews finally looked like Mark Andrews should. He did only have 3 catches, but it was for like 80 yards and a touchdown. So finally doing what he should have been doing. So now moving on to what Callan has marked as his game of the week, starting with the Detroit Lions heading to Dallas to take on the Cowboys. And you want to talk about the thwomping. It came from the road team this time. The Detroit Lions go into Dallas and win by a score of 47-9.
Yeah, this was really a beatdown. This wasn't a very entertaining game unless you were a Lions fan. But what I want to talk about here is the entertainment that the Lions put on, because they had 2 plays specifically where a flea flicker was successful in a touchdown for a 53-yarder to Sam Laporta. And then they had a play where they had a hook and lateral to an offensive lineman, Penei Sewell to be exact, with Dan Skipper lined out in a wideout position to block as like a screen, a wide receiver screen, with the offensive lineman being the wide receiver for the blocker and the receiver. So that was very entertaining to watch. And Both plays were actually successful, except for a penalty on the hook and lateral play, but which was then made the play called back. But either way, it was a successful running of the play, or execution of the play, I should say. So because of that, the Lions were very entertaining in this beatdown, and the Cowboys actually lead the league now in turnovers, or interceptions against man coverage. Well, that's 5 of them for Dak Prescott against man coverage. So you can tell that it's a weakness of Dak Prescott's is that man coverage, and they also are 0-3 at home after winning 16 straight previously before being 0-3 at home.
Crazy. Yeah, I cannot think of the last time I've seen a team literally meme on another team in the NFL. But after how it ended last year with the Dan Skipper thing and him being the ineligible receiver and the penalty that lost the Lions in the game, they literally had 3 different plays where they had the offensive lineman in a position where they could have caught the ball. That hook and ladder, they had another weird little like tight end screen type thing where a lineman actually got the ball. I can't remember which lineman, but he actually got the ball. And a whole separate play where they had Dan Skipper lined up out at receiver, who they didn't actually throw the ball to him, but the corner actually guarded him because at that point he was like, this guy might be getting the ball on a wide receiver screen. You have to be ready for that. So it was absolutely hilarious to see that from the Lions. Other than that, there was not much to this game. The Lions dominated all the way through. What is up with the Cowboys? That's really got to be more than anything the headline of this game. 3-3 is not a terrible record, but 0-3 at home, and the embarrassments they have at home this year is just absolutely insane. Dak has not looked good, even in garbage time when he's just passing and he should be racking up all these numbers. He still hasn't looked good. So I don't know what they got to do to get it figured out, but the Cowboys got to do something to get it figured out, or else they're just going to continue to get ran.
Down by 15 or more in each home game this year. Oof. At one point.
That is just bad. Now, moving on to my game of the week, I have the Cleveland Browns heading to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles, and the Eagles just slightly picking up a win by a score of 20-16. Now, let me preface this by it's ironic I called this my game of the week, because this was not that good of a game. I actually more just picked it because it was one of the closer games of the week. Almost every game this week, we just counted them right before we started, and not including the Monday night game as it hasn't happened yet. Only 4 of the games this week were within 10. Not even within 1 possession, but within 10 points, which is absolutely crazy to think about, this being one of them. But yeah, I'm not going to say it was a terrible game, but it was by no means a good game. It was entertaining, and the Browns were able to keep it close with a couple of fluke plays, including a blocked field goal that was actually returned for a touchdown, which was part of their 16 points. But nonetheless, the Eagles were just too much, and more than anything, the Browns were just too little as they've continued to look pretty abysmal, to say the least, this year. Deshaun Watson has not looked worth the trade or the money at all. They should be getting Nick Chubb back here either this upcoming week or the week after, which maybe flips the script for them a little bit. But Callan mentioned it before this episode. With Deshaun at starter, I completely agree with him that I don't know if it will really do much to flip the script. It's just a lot to overcome for them with how Deshaun has looked this year. And not too promising for the Eagles, the fact that they were in Philadelphia and had that close of a game with this letdown of a team.
Yeah, and this, even though the Eagles won, there actually was an interaction after the game between Eagles coach Nick Sirianni and some Eagles fans, because apparently they were booing them in the first half, and Sirianni, I guess, let it get to him and responded by giving the where's the booing now sign after the game
to your own fans.
And Philadelphia is pretty relentless, so that could really be detrimental to this team, especially to his career, just because they do not forgive or forget. And it's just a bizarre situation there in Philly. There was really, this game should have been well in hand for the Eagles, because Deshaun Watson has not been playing well. And the only reason the Eagles won was because A.J. Brown came back and had a huge 40-yard touchdown catch. to put the game away late in the fourth quarter. And if not for that touchdown catch, it could have been the Browns on top. And even though Deshaun hasn't been playing well, the Eagles really need to also get it figured out because they should be more explosive than this.
Yeah, the Eagles are sitting right now at a 3-2 record, and they just do not seem like a 3-2 team. I know that's not a great record, but even regardless of that, they just have not looked like what they should this year. The boos from the own fan. Philly's the only place I can think of it. Philly is a ruthless place. But that was our NFL Week 6 recap episode. Thank you all so much for watching, and make sure you stay tuned in until next week, or next episode rather, when we do our NFL Week 7 prediction episode. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.